Call the meeting to order and waiting for the chair. We'll get going. I'd like to call the executive committee meeting for Friday, April 8th. Looking at the agenda, item number 1, which is the approval of meeting minutes.
Move for approval.
We have one motion. Second. Further discussion? All those in favor say or indicate by voting. San Diego County
Supervisor Jacobs, please vote.
I don't have one.
You're bringing it
Okay,
back. We're adjusting.
Thank you.
Oh, not for long.
You can hand it back to Ron on his way.
Yeah, now you can hand it back to Ron.
Oh, that passed. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, now we got to get it back. You have 100% yes voting comments.
Public comments?
You just finished this item on the agenda.
Do you have any questions?
No public comments on this agenda.
Okay. So we're going to go to item 3, the review of the draft board agendas.
Actually, there's 3 agendas that we're going to talk about today. So I'll start off with the April 26th board business meeting agenda. First, we have approval of the meeting minutes followed by public comments, communications, member comments, and actions from policy advisory committees. On consent, we have approval of proposed solicitations and contracts. We do expect 2 solicitations to come to the board. Item 5 is the FY 2017 Transit Capital Improvement Program. That's an annual approval that the board does each year. It's going to transportation committee next Friday. Item 6 is a fiscal year 2015 request for exception to the transit extension ordinance requirements. Both the ITOC and transportation committee reviewed this, and I recommend approval of these exceptions for the 2 transit operators to the board. Item 7 is a memorandum of agreement with Oceanside for the Transnet debt financing program. Oceanside would like to access about $5 million of Sandex commercial paper program for one of their projects. So that is going to the transportation committee next Friday for recommendation to the board. And item 8 is the regular quarterly RTIP amendment, which is coming to the board as well. Items 9 and 10 are your standard monthly items on meetings and events attended on behalf of Sandag and reports summarizing delegated actions taken by the executive director. And then moving to reports, we have proposed hearing of necessity. We've been bringing these each month for acquisition of property interest for the Midcoast project. So this is for both Midcoast and the Elvira to Morena double track project. Item 12 is the California Active Transportation Program Cycle 3. It's a statewide competition, and we'll be proposing a couple projects from the San Diego region to submit for the statewide competition for active transportation funding. Item 13 is review of our proposed bond issuance. We expect the following month in May to bring actual bond documents and all the legal documents. We'd like to kind of update the board about the bond financing strategy for this coming summer. And item 14 is a closed session on a claim we received in relation to the downtown rapid stations project. We'd also like to add to this agenda, so pending discussion at your next meeting, the board meeting coming up on the potential funding measure. Depending on board's discussion, we'd like to add an item to April 22nd agenda where the board would consider any changes, if necessary, to the expenditure plan. We've had discussions with the transit operators and other folks. And we'd also be reviewing some of the, not the entire ordinance, but some of the key provisions to the ordinance that the board had asked us to bring back, which includes the eligibility of different types of projects and improvements for the local formula funds, what an early action program might look like, and some of the language about the transit projects as well. So we propose to add that. And Chair, draft force policy agenda. You have your standard public comments, communications, member comments. Again, it's a single issue item where, if you're considering the funding measure, we would be bringing the draft expenditure plan, ordinance, and ballot language to your May 13th meeting. So that concludes the proposed agenda setting.
Okay, any questions? Tom?
On the,
Councilman Gloria.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. On item number 11 on the board agenda, can you refresh my memory? So, where are we? Have we taken any action on that property previously?
These are, so we've been bringing, item 11, we've been bringing.
You've been bringing.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we're sort of working our way generally north up the corridor in coordination with kind of the construction schedule. So this is about, I want to say, a dozen properties, Mr. Jim?
Yes.
13 properties? Yes.
So these are ones that we've talked about or we've seen.
No, these are new ones.
These are okay.
These are new ones, yeah.
You've seen the overall map where we've shown
Yeah.
you all the pieces we're gonna need, and we've been bringing them in batches, so this would be a new batch. The chair had asked, a week or so ago, I think we think there's about 24 in total that still haven't come to the board, of which these 13 would be part of those. But, you know, we're continuing to work with property owners, and in many cases, we hope that we'll reach agreement. We won't need a resolution of necessity, but the driver for these is, given the length of time that it takes to get a court date, you know, we need to start early to make sure that we can move in parallel. We'll continue to work with the property owners, you know, sometimes all the way to the steps of the courthouse to try to, you know, reach a deal that's, you know, highest, best use, least private harm, right? So, so we're trying to bring these in batches, and this would be, Councilmember Gloria, 13 new ones that are part of the project, but that you haven't seen yet.
Okay.
And we probably have a couple more months of it, so we'll have April, May, and June.
Okay.
Current schedule.
And these are mostly pieces.
Right.
Or temporary.
Yeah, there's
Often
slivers or
temporary
construction
slivers.
easements that we need to build the project.
I feel like you've given us a presentation previously that kind of showed us everything that you were thinking about, the actual actions, the theory of necessity. You've broken that into digestible pieces. Trying to educate myself to make sure that what I was remembering in terms of what we'd sort of bitten off for all of the parcels is still working within what I remember being all those slivers and temporaries. That's what you're talking about. You're just bringing them back. We talked about the whole alignment. We're bringing them back individually for the theory of necessity. Got it. Thank you.
Probably the biggest one we're leaving because of the discussions are fairly positive, and we're hopeful that maybe there's an agreement even before.
And one of the most challenging one is the shopping center at the Hoya Village Drive. And, you know, at Westfield, we settled that, so there's not a need a resolution of necessity. But the Hoya Village, it's going to require a parking garage, and we're working with that property owner to configure the parking garage in a way that addresses their needs plus addresses our needs. And so we're still optimistic that we'll figure that out without the need for a resolution, but that's probably our most complicated one.
Thank you.
At UTC with Westfield, we did reach an agreement on a parking structure there. So it's, you know, it's not pie in the sky to think that we could do these things, because they're happening in some areas.
What's significant? I met with Westfield several times on that issue, so good job.
Thank you all. Thank you for doing that. Okay.
Move approval.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
By Mayor Voss, second by Mayor Morrison. Please, if there's no further comments, Mr. Rhodes. The voting is closed. That's approved unanimously. Move on to citizen reports. Four.
Good morning. Spring break in Washington.
Yay!
We're safe for a little while.
The House is in recess until April 11th, and the Senate has just returned off of their spring break. The Senate is expected to take up the FAA authorization bill first, and then also start the FY17 appropriations process. Likewise, when the House returns, they will also take up the FY17 appropriations and start moving the bills through the committees. Meanwhile, staff has been working to develop the grant applications for the Tigard Fast Lane. We received confirmation from the state that the Otay Mesa East Segment 2 project was selected as one of the top 3 applications for Fast Lane statewide, and will be submitted to the USDOT on behalf of the state as a priority. So this is good news. Likewise, since your last meeting on March 28th, the Federal Transit Administration released a notice of funding opportunity for the Bus and Bus Facilities Competitive Grant Program for FY16. The FTA will be awarding $211 million for bus and bus facilities and $55 million for low or no emission buses. The purpose of the bus program is to improve the condition of the nation's public transportation fleets and expand transportation access to employment, education, and healthcare facilities. Funds for the bus program will finance capital projects to replace or rehabilitate purchases of buses. The purpose of the low no emission bus program is to support the transition of the nation's fleet to the lowest polluting and most energy efficient transit vehicle technology to support the deployment of technologies advanced in the United States that were largely tested as part of demonstration projects and now are ready for wide deployment for transit fleets. Funds awarded for the low no program will finance the purchase of low or no emission vehicles that use these advanced technologies. Eligible applicants include FTA designees, grant designees such as SANDAG, MTS, and NCTD. Local non-federal matches are required for both of these programs. Applications will be due on May 13th, and we're working with staff and the transit agencies to identify regional projects that would compete for these funds. So that concludes my federal portion of the report, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Robin?
All right, good morning. At the state level, as you may recall at our last meeting, I shared that thousands of new bills have been introduced this session. Of those, we've been able to filter out some of those and narrow it down to about 100 bills that fall within the 2016 SANDAG legislative program. So we thought we'd provide just a brief update on a few of those that we're watching. First up, Assembly Bill 1746, which is our Bus on Shoulders bill, introduced by Assemblymember Stone, was passed unanimously out of the Assembly Transportation Committee last week and the Assembly Appropriations Committee this week. So next we'll be headed to Assembly 4. Assembly Bill 516, introduced by Assemblymember Mullen last year, you may recall, is a temporary license plate bill that the Executive Committee took action on. It's still pending final action as the author works with the administration to identify any final amendments that will be needed for its final passage. Assembly Bill 2170 is another bill that we're watching very closely. This bill was introduced by Assemblymember Frazier and would require that any federal freight formula programs under the FAST Act program that are received by the state would be filtered through the Trade Corridor Improvement Fund, or the TCIF program. As you may know, under Prop 1B, the TCIF program constructed nearly $250 million in infrastructure improvements in the San Diego region, including port access improvements, Phase 1 of State Route 11, as well as several double-track projects along the Lausanne corridor. So AB 2170 also was passed unanimously out of the Assembly Transportation Committee last week and will next be heard by Appropriations. Related to the border as well, Senator Hueso has introduced a joint resolution, SJR 22, which urges Congress to appropriate $248 million in funding to complete Phase 2 of the Calexico West Land Port of Entry. It's scheduled to be heard by the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee on the 19th. And finally, I also wanted to mention Assembly Bill 2289, which also was introduced by Assemblymember Frazier, which is a technical cleanup bill that makes it clear that operational improvements are to be included within the SHOP program. As you may recall, this is something that SANDAG was working very, very hard on last year to ensure that the Owen SHOP is something that's maintained during the discussion surrounding the state's transportation special session. While this bill will not substantively impact the way that SHOP is carried out, it does show that our efforts are having an impact in shaping the conversation around state funding and transportation. That being said, unfortunately, there have not been any developments on the state special session as of yet. The governor will be releasing his May revise next month, so we'll be watching closely to see what may be included on that front, as well as cap and trade and incorporation of any FAST Act funds or policy changes. And finally, just to keep you updated on the grant status at the state level, SANDAG submitted 2 concept proposals under the Cap and Trade Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program last month. One was a joint application with Chelsea for the Go by Bike, the Lost at Normal Heights application, and the other was a single application by SANDAG for the Inland Rail Trail called Connecting Vista Walk, Bike, and Sprint. We're expecting to hear back from the Strategic Growth Council by the 25th on whether one or both of these applications will be invited to submit full applications for consideration by the state. And we also submitted a Lausanne-wide joint application earlier this week under the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, also Cap and Trade State Program, and we expect to hear back on that award in late August. And then as Kim mentioned, we'll also be going to the board at your next meeting to talk about the state's active transportation program.
Councilman.
Robin, for AB 1746, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's applicable to SR 94 and some of the concepts we've had for the Golden Hill segment. Is that right?
It's applicable to Sandag and its entire jurisdiction, so it could be used anywhere that we feel it would be the best use of SR folder.
The key to the bills is right now, we almost gotta go get special permission every time we wanna do this. What this bill would do is it would make it more permissive, but you still have to get concurrence from CHP and Caltrans. And I think, as I've shared with the board in the past and now with the committee, I mean, one of the challenges is CHP uses those shoulders as ways to respond to incidents, and fire and safety folks use those shoulders in that fashion. So CHP continues to express concerns and reservations about converting all those to make them full-time permanent bus lanes. So I do think that, and we actually did a pilot project here in San Diego to demonstrate that, and the goal when we did that is we were interested in figuring out, could we use some of those shoulders, particularly during the times that we're constructing something, to be able to get, you know, the transit buses around some of that congestion and keep them on time. And so we demonstrated that we could do that successfully, but I think CHP still has reservations that those don't become permanent bus lanes forever, because they see those shoulders as being very important to them fulfilling their mission.
Right. The answer is yes, though. This would facilitate that, or at least take it in a step in a direction that if you were advocating that position, it would be beneficial to advocate for that bill. That said, I think in the board meeting, we're going to get a lot of folks who do like that kind of concept. Are any of those community groups, any of those individual activists, are they articulating on behalf of 1746?
That's a good question. I haven't seen any formal letters of support from those groups.
You know, I raise that because I recognize this, it's going to be a point of contention, and I think it's entirely appropriate for this organization, since we've taken an advocacy position on that bill, to ask those folks who are asking us to do this work, what in the hell are they doing, right? And I'm happy to communicate that if that's appropriate. I'm not interested in being pleasant about it at this point. But I'm saying it somewhat facetiously, but if we are in the business of advocating and there's some doubt about whether or not we're genuine in that advocacy, I have a report here saying that it is. I don't see anyone from those groups. This is a public meeting. They could comment. They are not. And so it just seems to me that perhaps there's a disconnect, because I certainly have received communication recently that folks doubt the sincerity, the genuineness of Sandag's commitment to the 94 and exploring other options. I would see this as being proof that we are at least attempting to. But I'm learning a little bit about Sacramento, and what I'm learning is it ain't enough for us to advocate for a bill. It does help the community partners are advocating. If they're not, then I don't consider their advocacy position to be genuine themselves, and we should probably point that out to them.
Yeah, I just checked, and so far it's only the transit districts that are on record as supporting, so I can share more information with you.
Why don't you send them an email? I'm sure it'll end up in the press.
Okay, any further questions?
Yeah.
Mayor Morrison.
Another bill that may not be more indirect for us, but since we work so closely and integrate the cities and the county's general plan in with all of our work, SB 1000 with Connie Leva, which right now there's 7 elements that are required to go into your general plans. This would add another element, and even though most of the parts of that element are already contained now within those 7, this would be a separate one for environmental justice that would be added, which most likely would complicate the general plan process that much more. So, and my understanding is that just made it out of the subcommittee this week. So that may be one that might complicate our lives that much more. No.
We'll make sure to add it to the list.
Okay.
Just you referenced the temporary driver's license things, and why are we doing it? Why is Sandag interested in that issue?
This was a bill that the executive committee took action on early last year, as well as the previous session, and adopted a support position.
So what's our interest in driver's license issues?
Driving license plate.
That's back to the public safety issues.
It's related to toll violations on our toll roads.
Oh, okay.
And the money
Okay.
that we lose due to the lack of license plates. We're not able to
Revenue.
Okay, all right, okay. Anything further? Okay, thank you, ladies. We're gonna go on to the good news from our Service Bureau, item number 5.
Good morning. I provide the Executive Committee a financial update of the Sandex Service Bureau a couple of times a year. Today's report is the mid-year report covering the time period of July through December 2015. As you know, the Service Bureau provides customized data and reports to member agencies as well as other public and private organizations on a fee-for-service basis. The services are provided through SANDAG and through its nonprofit benefit corporation, SourcePoint. The Executive Committee serves as the governing body of Service Bureau as well as the Board of Directors of SourcePoint. Therefore, the written report, which is agenda item 5, beginning on page 22 of your tablet, also includes the fiscal year 2015 financial audit of SourcePoint as required by the SourcePoint bylaws. One of the business goals is to generate revenue to help enhance the regional information system of the agency. This is the agency's integrated system of data, computer hardware, software models, computer models, and staff expertise, which provides a foundation for the work we do here at the agency. The Executive Committee has established a regional information system enhancement fee over and above project costs for this purpose. Table 1, which is shown on page 23 of your tablet, illustrates the fiscal year 2016 mid-year financial status. The financial status shows that total revenues earned for the first 6 months of this fiscal year were $227,900. Expenses related to performing these projects were $209,200, meaning revenues exceeded expenses by $18,700. Non-recoverable costs related to management, business development are also need to be covered with these revenues. So when these costs are taken into account, revenues exceeded expenses by $12,200 or 5.7%. This year's revenue is in line with revenues generated this time of year last year. We worked on about 40 projects during the July through December time period, and they're grouped by major category in the table. And I'll just highlight a couple of them to give you a flavor of the kind of work we're doing through the Service Bureau. The largest revenue generating category is the feasibility studies. And the Service Bureau has continued its work on 2 studies to explore the feasibility of a bicycle pedestrian tube on the San Diego Coronado Bridge and also a freeway cap on the State Route 94. The second largest category is our transportation modeling, and the vast majority of our Service Bureau projects run through this category. In addition to a number of smaller requests for routine traffic impact student development, the Service Bureau is also working on some larger projects to assist member agencies in their community plan and general plan updates. Customized demographic and economic and geographic information services, or GIS services, are also offered through the Service Bureau. And these projects range from some small customized demographic profiles to also some larger GIS mapping applications. In addition, as approved by the Executive Committee last July, the Service Bureau is assisting the California Coastal Commission and the City of Carlsbad in a pilot project to identify early coordination on issues related to Carlsbad projects that fall within the Commission's jurisdiction. So the necessary agreements were executed, and the pilot officially kicked off in January 1st of this year. The Executive Committee has expressed interest in receiving periodic updates, and I'll be happy to share those as the pilot continues. As mentioned earlier, the written report also includes the financial audit of SourcePoint. The auditor's report, which is in attachment 1, was also included as part of the SANDAG annual audit presented to the Board of Directors in February. The auditors have expressed an unmodified or clean opinion of the basic financial statements, and that is no audit findings were determined. This concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Any questions? 5% return, that's not bad. Okay.
We'll take it.
We just need more projects, that's all. Okay. No public comments. Upcoming meetings. The next one is Friday, May 13th. Friday the 13th. Thank you, Gary, for arranging this special schedule. And if there's no further comments, we declare this meeting adjourned.
Very good.